Planning to own a commercial laundry business? You might want to think twice. Not because you shouldn't do it, it's because there's a real gap between what this looks like from the outside and what it actually costs. And that gap is exactly what this video is for. If you've watched this channel's laundromat video, this is a genuinely different business, not the same one with bigger machines. No coin slots, no walk-in customers. Hotels, hospitals, restaurants, and nursing homes sign contracts and send linens by the truckload, every single week, year-round. Here's what a look at real, currently listed laundry businesses reveals. Multiple operators are sitting on significant installed processing capacity they're simply not using. One listing describes it directly. Current volume uses only a portion of installed capacity, creating upside without spending another dollar on equipment. So, if the machines aren't the constraint, what actually is? That's what we're figuring out today. One quick note before the numbers start. Every figure in this video is well-researched and checked against multiple sources, but research can still contain honest mistakes, and costs and regulations shift by state, city, and sometimes zip code. Treat these as your benchmark, not a quote for your specific situation. This video is for educational purposes only and is not legal, tax, financial, or business advice. Always do your own research and due diligence before making any business decision. A second note, specific to this episode. Health and sanitation regulations for laundering linens for hospitals and healthcare facilities specifically are stricter than general commercial laundry rules and vary by state. Verify your specific state's requirements directly before making any decision based on this video. The first cost, the one measured in square footage and pounds per shift, not machine count alone. Real processing capacity requires real industrial infrastructure. Real, currently operating businesses in this space give a concrete sense of scale. One Florida operation runs a 10,500 square foot facility with 13 industrial washers and 12 dryers, processing over 6,000 pounds of laundry per shift, serving more than 160 active commercial clients, listed for $1.5 million. A smaller, established operation in Rhode Island runs from a 3,455 square foot space on a $3,500 monthly lease, having generated close to $850,000 in annual revenue at its peak, serving hotels, motels, and nursing homes. Equipment itself scales with ambition. Industrial washers range from roughly 10 kilograms up to 100 kilograms of capacity per cycle, and the machinery quality you choose directly shapes both your processing capacity and your long-term maintenance costs. Well-run operations in this space report gross margins of 40 to 60% and net margins of 25 to 40%. Healthy numbers for a business this capital-intensive. Equipment financing deserves real attention too. Industrial washers and dryers at this scale represent a genuine capital commitment, and many operators lease or finance machinery rather than pay cash outright, keeping working capital free for the actual job of landing contracts instead of tied up entirely in hardware. The hidden trap, the one where machines sit idle while the real bottleneck waits somewhere else entirely. Installed capacity and actual contracted volume are two very different numbers. Multiple real, currently listed laundry operations describe the exact same pattern. Significant processing capacity built and paid for, running well under what it's capable of because contract volume hasn't caught up to the equipment. That's the real constraint in this business, and it's not what most people assume walking in. The machines are rarely the bottleneck. Landing and keeping enough institutional contracts to use that capacity is. Client concentration makes this worse. A business built around a relatively small number of large hotel or hospital contracts can have a huge share of its processing capacity riding on just one or two relationships. Lose a single major account, and a large chunk of that capacity goes idle overnight, with fixed lease and equipment costs continuing regardless. Reliability standards compound the risk. Institutional clients typically expect a 24 to 48-hour turnaround on soiled linens, And healthcare clients specifically layer on stricter sanitation requirements than standard commercial laundering. A single missed turnaround, or a real quality lapse, is exactly the kind of failure that costs a contract representing a meaningful share of your installed capacity. Hotels and hospitals rarely give a struggling vendor a long runway to fix a problem either. Fresh linen isn't optional inventory they can wait on. A missed delivery window often means the client quietly starts calling a backup vendor the very next week. The real engine, the one built on filling capacity you already paid for, landing the next contract is worth more here than buying the next machine. So if machines aren't the constraint, where does real growth actually come from? Contract diversification across client types, specifically to protect and fill that installed capacity. The strongest operations in this space don't lean on one hotel chain or one hospital system. Real listings show client rosters spanning hotels, restaurants, event planners, party rental companies, nursing homes, and multi-unit housing simultaneously, spreading concentration risk across a genuinely diverse client base. That diversification does two things at once. It protects the business if any single account is lost, and it fills more of that expensive installed capacity with real, billable volume, instead of letting machines sit idle between a handful of large but concentrated contracts. Since a meaningful share of the industry's real capacity is already sitting underused, the fastest path to more revenue for many operators isn't a bigger facility. It's a sharper focus on landing and servicing more of the contracts the existing equipment could already handle. The real money in commercial laundry. The washers and dryers were never the scarce resource. The relationships that keep them running at real capacity are. An idle machine costs you exactly the same whether it's idle because you never bought enough or because you never landed enough contracts to use what you already had. A third real listing makes the capacity versus contracts gap concrete at a different scale entirely. One industrial scale operation, 17 years in business, 16 employees, running from a 20,000 square foot leased facility at $15,000 a month, reports $1 million in gross revenue on equipment alone valued at $750,000, listed for $350,000. That's a facility built to serve hotels, nursing homes, rehabilitation centers, event centers, and multi-unit housing simultaneously. Precisely the diversified client mix this video has been describing, running on equipment that represents more than twice the asking price of the business itself. The asking price sitting well below the equipment's own value is itself a signal. In this industry, the machines were never the scarce or expensive part of the equation. The contracts and relationships that keep them running are what buyers are pricing. So let's run the two real outcomes. The optimistic case. You build a diversified client roster across hotels, healthcare, hospitality, and event rentals from the start. Protect turnaround reliability as seriously as any other business on this channel protects its central operating number, and actively sell against your installed capacity instead of assuming contracts will simply arrive. Capacity utilization climbs toward what the equipment can handle. No single lost account threatens the whole business, and margins track toward that healthy 25 to 40% net range well-run operations report. The realistic case. You land one or two large anchor contracts early, build the business around them without real diversification, and treat sales as a one-time task instead of an ongoing discipline. Installed capacity sits meaningfully underused, fixed lease and equipment costs keep accruing regardless, and the loss of a single major client does outsized damage to a business that was never built to absorb it. Same machines, same square footage, same starting capacity. The entire gap between those two outcomes comes down to whether contract diversification was treated as the actual business or left as an afterthought behind the equipment. So is it worth it? If you're picturing a straightforward B2B, recurring revenue business built purely around good equipment, the equipment was never the hard part, and multiple real listings in this exact industry prove it. What's true is that this remains a strong, healthy margin business for owners who treat contract acquisition and diversification as the real, ongoing job, not a task that ends once the doors open. For someone willing to fill installed capacity with a genuinely diverse client base, this can be a durable, resilient business built on equipment that's earning what it cost. For someone assuming a couple of good contracts and solid machines are enough, the idle capacity sitting in that facility is quietly costing real money, whether anyone's tracking it or not. Last reminder: sanitation and health regulations for laundering healthcare linens specifically are stricter than general commercial rules and vary by state. This is not legal or business advice. Verify your specific state's requirements directly before making any decision based on this video. Remember this: nobody gets rich buying bigger washers.